everyone and welcome back. Today we're talking about the new Top Gun movie, an exciting upgrade to the original that actually makes you want to go back and watch the original. This movie is the definition of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, just remake it. It was an experience, and I strongly believe that streaming this film would be a crime. You should watch it in the biggest screen possible, and ideally if you're comfortable with as many people as possible. I can't believe how much I enjoyed myself, and so to give you a brief overview, the student becomes the teacher as Top Gun Maverick catches up with Pete Mitchell, aka Maverick, aka our favorite Tom Cruise, 30 years later. Despite neither a demotion nor a promotion, he is still considered one of the Navy's top aviators. Tasked now with the responsibility of coaching a new generation of Top Gun pilots, Maverick struggles as one of his trainees is his best friend's son, who died with him while flying. Like father, like son, Maverick is unable to ignore the resemblance and therefore cannot stop his past from catching up with him. The mission is to destroy an uranium enrichment facility in an unnamed enemy country. By not naming the country, the audience is free to kind of sympathize, cheer on the characters on screen. So this enemy country could be anywhere. It could be Iran, it could be Russia, it could be, it doesn't really trigger anyone. So therefore, you're kind of, as an audience, it's kind of nice because you can turn your brain off and enjoy the ride. The actual mission only makes sense when Maverick explains it. The pilots must maneuver tight spaces to destroy its target, so this uranium enrichment facility, and make it back in time without being detected or passing out. So they must do all this in around 2 minutes, which sounds like an incredibly difficult task based on Maverick's assessment and everyone's reaction to this 2-minute time window. And as Top Gun pilots, nothing scares them. So the fact that these 2 minutes is causing them some distress tells the audience that we should also be distressed. Film is nostalgia at its finest. It starts off slow, but when it kicks off, man, it kicks off. And it's perfectly exhilarating, and it's so cringy and weird at the same time. You find yourself finishing their lines, especially if you're watching it with a big audience, don't think, just do. Everyone starts to kind of, get into it. And it's fun, but it's also I hate myself for doing this. The cast is energetic and entertaining, and the film does a great job of complimenting Tom Cruise by bringing back the old and reinventing the new. The movie uses scenes from the original that pleases old fans, but also new fans as well. And it doesn't take much to connect the dots. I did not watch the original when I walked in, and I got the gist of it. They really draw it out for you as much as possible. Reprising their roles is Tom Cruise, of course, as Maverick, but also Val Kilmer, who was Cruise's main rival in the original. And looking at Val Kilmer in the original film was one of the highlights. I mean, he is a movie star. They don't make him like this anymore. And Kilmer has been battling throat cancer, and the film accommodates this for what could honestly be his last role. The scene between Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise was so perfect, and it took me by surprise. Again, all you need to do is see old pictures of them and compare to just feel all emotional and just happy. And so, known as the Iceman, Val Kilmer has been his wingman for the last 30 years, and it seems over time their relationship has changed. So they kind of went from flying together to Val Kilmer, so the Iceman, being the only thing standing between Maverick and dishonorable discharge. And I do like the evolution of their friendship, because it speaks to their maturity level. And again, that scene was just, it took me by surprise, and I was like, Missing is Kelly McGillis, who is replaced by Jennifer Connelly, allegedly because she was considered too old to reprise her role. McGillis and Cruise were vibes, to say the least. Their courtship was narrated by the song Take My Breath Away, which was both the cringiest and most amazing courtship I have ever seen. I mean, for me, it worked. I feel like if you watch the original, either you think Maverick is a creep, or you're kind of yeah, take my breath away. The whole time I was watching the original, I kept thinking, I want to find someone who looks at me with the same degree of certainty that this man is looking at this woman. So again, I think it works for some, and for others, you're like, get help. The chemistry between Jennifer Connelly and Tom Cruise is about the same as it was with Kelly McGillis. And these storylines where they kind of force Maverick to date, I mean, they kind of shove it down our throats, right? They use every cliche possible. They do everything possible to get us used to the idea of him dating. But the problem with this is that the chemistry between the aviators is so intense, and it's much more, like, he will always have more chemistry with the people he works with than any civilian. And so in the new film, they kind of admit to this. Like, it's so cringy that you can't really, you kind of like, you're like, okay, I guess we'll do this. In terms of new characters, the film does its best to mirror the egos and personalities of its predecessor. Miles Teller plays Lieutenant Bradley Rooster Bradshaw and is a literal spitting image of his father. I mean, it's like copy-paste. You're like, yep, again, I can kind of understand what's happening here. The supporting cast, notably Glenn Powell, I think is supposed to be a younger Maverick. So some of the characters, like, they kind of mirror them in a weird way where you're like, okay, I think I get who you're supposed to be. I like the addition of John Hamm as Maverick's superior, who both has a job to do and cannot do that job without Maverick. As I explained in the beginning of the film, the pilots must maneuver tight spaces in around 2 minutes. At some point, John Hamm's character gets so sick of Maverick and takes over and informs the team that this mission can be done in 4 minutes instead of 2 minutes, to which I immediately said, no, that's too much time. You know, you're gonna be killed. Like, you need to move faster, you need to fly faster. And of course, like, my analysis is based on absolutely no information besides what Maverick told us was possible, right? And, you know, again, these movies make you feel like you're such an expert. And throughout the film, I was so impressed by how professional it looked. In preparation for filming, the main cast underwent a 3-month intensive Navy-approved boot camp designed by Cruise to enable them to be in planes for as much as possible. Of course, they're not the ones piloting the planes, but it does explain why everything feels so real. Like, especially when they're doing the flight simulations, like, you feel like you're in the plane with them. Like, it's really like edge of your seat craziness. The practice flights leading up to the mission are heart-pounding. And again, the mission is explained simply enough that as an audience, you feel like you understand, like, okay, what needs to be done for them to succeed. Despite their task, the movie never takes itself too seriously. Like, it's serious, but it's still like super funny and enjoyable. And the way they build tension. So they have all these kind of simulations until they get to the real sort of mission. And so by the time you get to the real mission, you're literally like edge of your seat. You're like, I really hope they make it. You're so invested in them making it out, like step by step. You know, you're actually following the mission. You're like, okay, first they have to do this, second they have to do this, third they have to do this. And in comparison to the first film, the flight sequences in this movie are a lot easier to follow. And a lot of that has to do with technology. I was shocked by how invested I was. And a lot of this had to do with the fact that everything was so cool. Right, the soundtrack was so cool, the characters were so cool, the uniforms were so cool, the haircuts, their bodies, like everything. And it got me thinking, like, Top Gun is considered American propaganda at its finest. And it introduces you to American exceptionalism through charismatic and likable characters. Their mission is to literally fly through difficult terrain in an impossible time period. In order to complete their mission, this requires a degree of synchronicity, discipline, intelligence, which after some time watching this, you're like, I don't think this is possible outside of this Top Gun program. Like, you're watching this and you think, these are the only people in the world that are able to do this. The film does a good job of kind of setting this up for you right from the start, right? So the movie begins with this text, and it begins in the same way in both films. On March 3rd, 1969, the United States Navy established an elite school for the top 1% of its pilots. Its purpose was to teach the lost art of aerial combat and to ensure that the handful of men who graduated were the best fighter pilots in the world. Dramatic music plays. Today, the Navy calls its fighter weapons school. The flyers call it dramatic music, Top Gun. And so the setup is so amazing, right? You're defending freedom and you're looking amazing while doing it. Fast forward 30 years later, how is it possible that such a storyline still works? How is it possible that it hits, I would say, even harder? Like, this second movie is better than the first, you know? And so why is that? The original Top Gun was so successful as a military marketing tool that enlisting booths were literally installed in cinemas, and overall recruitment increased by roughly 500%. So imagine that. Fast forward many years later, amidst COVID, of course, and high rates of unemployment, it's really hard not to foresee Top Gun, you know, inspiring the masses. Like, I watched this with a live audience, and everyone was just like happy as hell. Currently, the US Army faces a war for talent and shrinking battalion numbers. The pool of qualified candidates has fallen by half since the beginning of COVID, and the Navy declared that it was 5,000 to 6,000 sailors short at sea. So what's the solution? Watching Top Gun Maverick, to be honest, there is nothing seductive about becoming a combat pilot. So watching them undergo simulation after simulation, you know, it's no wonder that no one wants to join the military. I mean, it's both physically and mentally traumatizing. Like, you know, they're passing out, the pressure on their bodies. Like, you're watching this thinking, absolutely not, sir. Like, there's nothing about this. Like, as cool as you look, I don't want to die. It's so, you know, watching this, I'm like, is this movie trying to recruit people, or is it trying to keep it away? Or is it just entertainment? Like, what are we supposed to take from this? Especially considering the effects of the first film. At the end of Top Gun Maverick, so spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen the movie, just maybe pause it here. Everyone makes it out alive. So all this mental trauma, all this physical trauma is kind of worth it, because in the end they complete the mission and no one dies. And I think the moral of the story is that the military is its own worst enemy, which is why they don't name this phantom enemy. And to be honest, as someone who goes to cinema, like who sees movies a lot, and anyone who frequents, you know, the movie theater, this movie is impossible to hate. And the reason is it's impossible to hate is because it does what Hollywood does so well, which is escapism. You know, it provides a space for us to turn off our brains and just be together as one and enjoy the ride. When you kind of think about the reality of the military and what Top Gun is showing us, right? Like, in real life, insubordination, like that shown of Maverick and like all the other Top Gun pilots, you know, it would never be tolerated. I don't know, people in the military let me know, but I think he would have been dishonorably discharged a long time ago. But you know, that's besides the point. He looks cool and he's really good at his job. So I guess that's supposed to somehow make up for everything else terrible that he does. And so you're watching this film and you're kind of wondering, like, who wouldn't want to become an aviation Avenger with a cool nickname? So a main theme of the original Top Gun movie was redemption. So Maverick lost his friend, and as a result of losing his friend, he nearly quit flying. But with some motivation, he pushed through, however, still carrying the burden of the past. 30 years later, Maverick is still grieving his friend. You know, he still feels responsible for what happened. However, he has a much more mature outlook. And this outlook that he's developed over time is one in which he wishes to pass down to recruits. And these new recruits, I guess the idea being they're the ones who are going to right all the wrongs and defend us from all these unknown enemies. And all this to say, you know, this movie is a great commentary on Hollywood blockbusters, and specifically how these types of stories and remakes sort of keep America on a pedestal, right? And you guys tell me, is this just a movie? You guys let me know what you think. And, you know, it will be interesting to see, especially like the numbers that this film pulls, the effects of it, maybe no effects. But again, like, I was hyped, and I'm not even someone who kind of enjoys these types of films, but I was down. You know, I was rooting for them every step of the way. Whether or not I get into a plane and do that, I mean, it's a no from me, but maybe it's a yes from you. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.